أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد. If you cast your mind back, the last Seerah class that we had done was actually the story of Khaybar, and we already done a first section of that Khaybar, but obviously just to make it easier for all of you, I'm going to just kind of do a recap. Now, before I do the kind of recap on the last story or the last section of the Seerah that we've covered, I need you to try to understand the concept of Khaybar and why Khaybar is one of the major milestone events that happened during the time of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And if you listen to a lot of the conversations and debates, sometimes at speakers' corners, you might see some of these brothers who are having debates with the Jews and even some of the Christians. Khaybar comes up quite a lot, okay? And a lot of topics within Khaybar get raised towards the Muslims who have some challenges to answer those questions. And the reason why I say that is because it's important to understand that many of the people in the audience that we have, Khaybar, it may be something that's new to you. You don't understand the story behind it. You may have heard about it. You might have some inkling from of the conversations or previous talks, but it's very important to understand not just Khaybar, but many of the milestones events that have happened. And that's what we tried to do during the Seerah classes, to try to give you some context, and then for you to go away with that context and then really try to understand any more details that you require if there's certain things that are confusing or issues that came up that require some answering, because there's no doubt issues will come up that you will probably want some light sort of reflected upon that to get a better understanding. Now, when we talk about Khaybar, okay, we are talking about a town or effectively a city in the Arabian Peninsula. So we're not going to talk about in the context of the Arab world today. We're going to cast ourselves back 1400 years ago at the time of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when all of this event took place. So Khaybar is effectively situated north of Medina. So if you remember the map of the Arab Peninsula, you'll see that on the west side towards the coast is you got Makkah, and then you've got Medina, and then you've got Khaybar fairly just north of Medina. Now, the makeup of Medina, just to summarize as much as I can, was that when Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam took control over Medina and he had the support of the Muslims, there were three tribes that existed that were non-Arab, and they were effectively the Jewish tribes. And we talk about the Banu Nadir, the Banu Qaynuqa, and the Banu Qurayza. And you know from the lessons that we went through that all three of these tribes had created or had invoked themselves in some level of treachery, which resulted in punishment, or they got banished from Medina. The main one of that group was the Banu Nadir. Now, Banu Nadir, out of the three, were considered to be the more the politically astute, the more they used to be very enticed in really positioning themselves to get control and power continuously, which basically forced them into playing a lot of games with a lot of the groups and the various tribes. And so they created and they planned a lot of treachery against Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They had a real bee in their bonnet about the fact that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam turned up and took control over Medina. And eventually an event happened in Medina that forced them to be expelled out of Medina. As a result of that, three main key people from the Jewish tribe, from the Banu Nadir, Salam bin Abi Abu al-Haqaiq, then his brother Kinana ibn Abi al-Haqaiq, and the third one is Huway bin Akhtab. Okay, three very famous Jews who were leaders. They basically packed up their bags. When they left Medina, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to them, "You can take whatever you can carry, but you're not to come back here again." And they left. Many of those tribes, they went to Khaybar, others went to other places. Now, Khaybar is predominantly a Jewish city, and it's a very powerful city. It's a city that has multiple fortresses. It's situated, like I said, it's situated northern part. It has phenomenal agriculture land. They were growing plenty of date palm trees. They would grow and they would sell, they would trade. They became so wealthy that within their own city, they didn't have one fortress, they had multiple fortresses, because each of those fortresses were governed by their own leaders or their tribal leaders. So people would talk about Khaybar to the extent that in the Arabian Peninsula, that they were such a powerful force to deal with that it was pointless even trying to plan to take over Khaybar. No Arab tribe would even bother. Khaybar was such a powerful force in itself that they had the ability to negotiate or buy the services of different various Arab tribes to fight various other Arab tribes to gain position or to gain an advantage. So Khaybar had a very strong positioning until these three guys turned up, the three guys that we mentioned from the Banu Nadir. And when they turned up, and Khaybar took them in because they had pity on them, and plus they revered these three guys. They were very powerful leaders and very powerful politicians, and they took them on board. And over that period of time, their hatred for Muhammad ﷺ and the Muslims grew so much. The motivation for that revenge that they wanted after what happened during the Battle of Khandaq, if you remember the Battle of the Trenches, it was these three who were involved in engaging the people at the Ghatafan tribe and the Quraysh and leveraging them to kill Muhammad ﷺ and to get rid of the Muslims in Medina. But whilst they had a pact with the Muslims, whilst they had a pact and agreement, they created this treachery within Medina, and they worked with the other organizations and other tribes to attack Muhammad ﷺ and to get rid of every Muslim, whether they were male, female, child, it did not matter. They wanted them gone and dead. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala folded that plan, even though the odds were against them. This is the beautiful lessons we learn again and again and again, that if you do not put your trust in Allah, Allah will not put his trust in you. Allah will never give you the outcome that you want. And that was the only deciding factor between a Muslim and a non-Muslim, a Muslim and the Jews and the Christians, and the Muslims and the polytheists, for example, that Muhammad ﷺ and his group, everything they done was about their trust in God and leaving the result in the hands of Allah, but making that effort. And as a result of that, they were never disappointed. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost, sometimes they gained, sometimes they didn't gain. But because of that ethos, because of that element of their iman, that is what made them unbreakable. So these three, when they went into Khaybar, Khaybar took them on board, and they maneuvered and positioned themselves to get control. And they then politically positioned themselves to use Khaybar to launch an attack against the Muslims in many different ways. So there were many things that were going on in the background while Muhammad ﷺ was dealing with the Meccans, while Muhammad ﷺ was dealing with the Ghatafan tribe and all the other various tribes in Najd, for example, or Hejaz. Muhammad ﷺ, while he was busy, Khaybar was getting their hands dirty, messing around, paying off tribes to keep continuously fighting against Muhammad ﷺ. And we covered these stories. There hasn't been an event or seerah that we haven't covered where there has been so many different groups who were trying to attack Muhammad ﷺ. Khalid bin Sufyan was another one. For example, the one that we sent Hazrat Unais, Muhammad sent Hazrat Unais to assassinate him because he had an army of 3,000 people to try and attack Muhammad ﷺ. So they were behind the plotting of many things. What was beautiful about this whole series of events, that Khaybar, why was Khaybar left almost towards the end, towards the last part of Muhammad ﷺ's life? Muhammad ﷺ had that treaty of Hudaybiyah, if you remember. Now, what was happening was Muhammad ﷺ wanted to go to Makkah. The Meccans forbid Muhammad ﷺ to go in. They didn't want war, so they had the treaty of Hudaybiyah for 10 years. And the agreement was basically, we have an understanding, you will not come to perform your Umrah this year, you will come next year. And the reason why the Meccans did that is they wanted to save their reputation. They wanted to save their face in the eyes of everybody else. That we can't just let anybody walk into Makkah and do whatever they want, and especially when it comes to Muhammad and his men. So they said, you come back next year. That way it looks like we're in control. and we have an agreement that we will not fight you, and anyone who's with us or with you, they will also be part of that agreement. What did that do for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Well, at that time, the Muslims were so upset and so disappointed because they couldn't enter into Makkah. They were so disheartened. But Allah did not allow them because Allah had a bigger and a better plan for them. And this was key. This plan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had planned, this is where sometimes, look, the Sahabi, when they were not allowed to enter Makkah and that agreement was made, they were very upset. They were very upset to the point where Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed them, just shave your hair and sacrifice your animals. They didn't listen. He had to say it 3 times until his wife Salama radiallahu anha said to him that you go out, shave your head and sacrifice your animals, and they will do it. And they did. But the point was, the emotion was that they felt like we've lost, right? This wasn't the result we wanted. And this happens to us every day in our lives. We want something. We're so bent over the fact that we want to achieve something, that we want to get those A-level grades. We want those GCSEs. We want to win a competition. We want to get that job. And sometimes you put your time and your effort in there. You make those du'as, and then you go for that job or you go for that exam and you don't get the outcome. You know exactly how you feel. You feel like you've been ripped out. Yeah, all of your iman has been ripped out and put on a platter so for you to look at, like, what is left in me? But we always fail to understand that Allah has always something better for us. Allah has always made a promise to us that He never lets down the believers. If you have a pact with Allah, He will never let you down. And it is that 1 extra inch of your iman that you just have to go over to put your trust in Him to keep yourself together. If you don't have that, you fall apart. And the funny thing is that in life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this to all of us. So it almost like He throws these tests in and he does this to see who will stay with me and who will drop out. Who has the iman and who does not have the iman. And those who will drop out, Allah ta'ala says, then you fall into 2 categories. One is you may have the opportunity to come back to me if you recognize that you have faulted and that really the weakness was with you and not the fact that I failed to give you what you wanted. Or you're in the other camp. You lose your iman completely. You never go back towards Allah. And for those people, it's nothing but distress and destruction and just pain in their life and stress. So here, this ayah was absolutely beautiful. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, how Allah ta'ala answered the Sahabi on this subject. And so this was mentioned in Surah 48, verses 18 to 21. And Allah says, indeed, Allah was pleased with the believers when they gave their pledge to you, O Muhammad, under that tree. And He knew what was in their hearts. And He sent down a sakina, a calmness and tranquility upon them. And then He rewarded them with a near victory, an abundant amount of spoils that they will capture. And Allah is ever almighty and all wise. Allah has promised you abundant spoils that you will capture, and He has hastened for you this. And He has restrained the hands of the men from you that will prevent you from getting this, that it may be a sign for the believers, and that He may guide you to the straight path, and other victories and much other good booty that there are. He promises you this, which are not yet within your power. Indeed, Allah encompasses them, and Allah is ever able to do all things. This ayah talks about you and me every day. This ayah talks about when you are in a very bad situation and you feel like things are not going right. As long as you have that one channel open with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in that channel you do your salah, you do your du'as, you have that contemplation time where you think about Allah, you worship Him in your own way, as in that your dhikr. When you have that connection, and what I mean by that is little things as well, that anything that happens, you always remind yourself, Allah is in control, Allah is the master, Allah is in control, Allah is the master. You know, they always say, keep repeating things and eventually you'll end up believing it. When you have that one channel open, that's what Allah Ta'ala says, when things are bad, but you have that connection, He will throw down this thing called sakina on you. And sakina, I mean, is calmness and tranquility. Now, some of you will know that when things are difficult, when you face challenges, there are times when you've opened that channel with Allah, you still feel good. You could be out of a job for a very long time. But if that channel is open and you're working on keeping that channel, because Shaitan tries to close that channel, he tries to break that frequency continuously. If you can maintain that open, Allah says, once that is open, I will give you calmness and sakina, meaning I will give you confidence. Don't worry. I will take care of everything. And then once you develop that confidence, and once you build that trust, then Allah will give you that reward. And before you know it, you end up getting your grades, you end up getting 5 or 6 calls for a job, you get really good offers. And not only that, it just gets better after that, right? You get other opportunities, you get other investments that come in, or you have good news that your kids have done well in their exams, or they just got themselves a great job, and it just gets better and better. All of that's what Allah Ta'ala is saying here, is that once you do that one little thing for me, I will throw first thing sakina on you, calm you. So you're more relaxed because you made that approach. So I take the worry from you, and then I will overload you with the abundance of the goodness of this dunya. And that is something that we have to learn from this. So when the Muslims knew about this, that Allah Ta'ala had promised them the Khaybar, that was it. Muhammad gave the permission, we are going to Khaybar. And they were so motivated. They loved the fact that because they knew that their poverty will now be answered with the rewards of Allah, the material rewards. And so everybody went. We talked about how even the hypocrites, even some of the polytheists, everybody wanted to join in, not for the sake of Islam. Some of them just literally went for the sake of the money, because they knew that Muhammad ﷺ would be successful. They wanted to take that opportunity to become rich, right? To have a goodness. But for the true believers, it was just a case of implementing Islam and going forward. So we talked about how Muhammad ﷺ tracked his way towards Khaybar, and he got to the higher point of Khaybar, and this whole situation about how the Jews had also hired the what we call the assassin tribe, or the vanguards, these group of people who get paid, mercenaries effectively, who got paid to come and fight with them, but they didn't join. So it was the Yehus left by themselves against the mercy of Muhammad ﷺ. When Muhammad ﷺ arrived and the permission was given, he went forward and they fought. Now, remember, Khaybar is a big city, and it has multiple fortresses in there. And just to give you an idea, so some of those fortresses, one is the first one that they will come across is a fortress by the name of Naim. The next one is Asab. The next one is Abu al-Nizar. Then there's another one called Al-Qamus, which we'll talk about as well, and Al-Mani, Al-Wati, and Al-Salaim. So these are the various fortresses, and I'll talk about them in a second. You don't have to memorize these, but just to have an understanding. The most difficult one was the first one. So what happened was, when the Muslims got ready in the morning to war, the Yehus did not know, the Jews did not know that the Muslims were ready. So they came out there, you have a fortress and then the big gates of Khaybar. So you have the big gates of Khaybar surrounded and many fortresses inside. They came out to graze their animals, to get the water, to get the wood, etc., to do their daily work. When they walked out, they saw Muhammad ﷺ and the army, and they shrieked and they ran back in again. And this is where Muhammad ﷺ said that for these people, it's a bad day for an enemy that we have warned when we can dismount on their land. If we can, it's a bad day for you when we can come to your land and you haven't done nothing. You know this is going to turn out very bad for you. So what happened was the Muslims entered and they started to fight the first fortress that was in front of them, which is the fortress of Naim. This was a very difficult fight. The fortresses were big. They were well equipped, okay? And they had everything they needed, right, for a long period of time. So Abu Bakr Siddiq, for example, radiallahu anhu, he started off with the banner and they fought day to night. Very difficult, came back, did not succeed. Abu Bakr Siddiq, Umar ibn Khattab went out the next day with the banner, went and fought, came back, he did not succeed. Now, they say during that period of time, for the first 3 days, Muhammad ﷺ had a very severe headache, and therefore he himself wasn't going out for the first couple of days. It was just these Sahabi that were taking the army. And it's very hard to fight when you got these brick walls, these massive big rocks, and you're looking upwards, to the point that one of the Sahabi was killed because while he was down at the bottom of the fortress, one of the Yuhus, named by a man by the name of Marhab, who was one of the leaders of the named fortress, he pushed it over a, those stone mills and threw it, and it hit his head and basically crushed him. Muslims are feeling, we can't penetrate this. People are right, what they said. Khaybar is unpenetrable. This thing is just like rock. And then Muhammad ﷺ said, tomorrow I will pick someone who Allah loves and I love and he loves them. Everyone got excited. They thought, oh, Muhammad ﷺ is going to pick me. He's going to pick me. So the next morning, people started coming up towards Muhammad ﷺ, like putting their face in front of his, like, is it me? Do you want to give me the banner? Am I the one? Because to have that honor to say that this man loves Allah and the Prophet, and Allah loves him and the Prophet loves him, is a great blessing. So they all waited, and they all were waiting to see who was going to get that respect. And then people came forward and Muhammad told them to move away, move away, move away. And then he said, where is Ali? And then eventually they called Ali over. Now the problem with Ali was Ali had an infection in his eye, which caused him a lot of problem. Muhammad ﷺ did shifa on him, made some dua, and with the blessing of Allah, he cured his eyes. And then Hazrat Ali said to him, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to call upon them on the fight? He said, you go out there and you fight, and you call them upon Islam. You call them upon the Shahada. You ask them to accept it. And if they don't, then you take them out. So Hazrat Ali, immediately when he went there and he took the army and he went to the fortress, this man Marhab came out, and he was the leader and the commander, but he was a very strong warrior. Now remember, Khaybar wasn't just a city of wealth and rich people. They had, obviously, with that money, they paid, and they had some of the finest warriors and fighters. Marhab came down. Now he had a helmet, a very big Yemenis helmet. The Yemenis helmet were long and they're big. And he had a stone in his helmet about this size, right? That was right in the, that was stuck in his helmet. And they started to fight. Now, apparently before Hazrat Ali began to fight, one other Sahabi came to try and tackle him. And if you remember, we talked about a man by the name of Amr ibn al-Aqwa. Now, when they were traveling to Khaybar, Amr ibn al-Aqwa would read beautiful poetry, inciting the Muslims to fight for the sake of Allah, make dua, etc. And Muhammad ﷺ, when he heard this man, he said to them, who is he? And they said, this is Amr ibn al-Aqwa. And he said, it's just unfortunate that he will not be with us for long. And Umar ibn Khattab said to Muhammad ﷺ, I only wish that you didn't say that so that we could have him for longer, because he's motivating us so much. So Amr ibn Aqwa went out there first to duel with him, but he wasn't much of a fighter, but they wanted to fight for the sake of Allah. And so when he was fighting Marhab was too strong for him, too powerful, too skilled. And he injured Amr ibn Aqwa. And in the midst of being injured and desperation, Amr ibn Aqwa took his sword and he swung it and he missed Marhab. And what did he do? He ended up cutting and slicing off his own ankle. And as a result of that, he had severe bleeding and he died. Now, his son, Salama bin Aqwa, was there. And he was very upset. And Muhammad saw him being upset. He said, why are you upset? He said, the Sahabi and the Muslims here, they're saying that his death was in vain because he didn't manage to do anything and he ended up killing himself effectively. And he said, they're wrong. He said, by Allah, he goes, your father will get twice the reward of everybody else. It's not about whether you can do something or you can't. And this is, I always remind people, we do a lot of activities in the community. We try to put effort in. We ask people, come and do it. Don't do it because we necessarily want help or you should be doing something for your community. Do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have a very short life, right? COVID has taken 2 years like that. Where's your time gone? If I was to sit down with each and every one of you and say to explain to me what happened, what have you been doing since COVID started? You could probably explain to me in 20 minutes everything that you've done. There's no barakah in time. We're running out of time. So when you are given the opportunity, it is not about whether you can do it effectively or whether you're good at it. Who cares? It is what your heart desires to please Allah. That's what counts. And that's the key thing. Because the moment you say, I can't do it and I don't do it, it is not about that. Your whole mindset is wrong. When you are asked to come and help, even the smallest of things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have no idea how much He rewards you. We have a misunderstanding about this in the Quran and Hadith. We think everything we do must result in tangible events, must result in tangible results, must be something that we can see and feel and be effective for the Muslims. No. Some of these Sahabi, they couldn't fight for their life. They got out the battlefield in 3 seconds, they've been shot. But the reward they got was immense, is what they put forward and what they sacrificed. So then Hazrat Ali came forward and they talked to each other. Marhab said, you do not know who I am. I am a lion who is unleashed. And when you see a lion, what do? You get scared and you run. People run from me. You think you can challenge me? And then Hazrat Ali said, my mother named me after a lion. And you will see one lion against another. And immediately after a few exchanges, Hazrat Ali took his sword and he literally hit him from the helmet. He ducked, turned and hit him from the helmet. And they said that his sword went through the helmet, broke the stone in half. And the hadith goes on to say that the blade could not go further than his molar. It ended up here and killed him. And he took his head and he took it to Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The moment this happened, Naim Fortress, they went crazy. They thought, that's it. Our greatest warrior and leader's gone. They came out, they tried to fight the Muslims and they were unable to defeat them. So the Muslims, after about 3 or 4 days, they took this fortress Naim. Now, one of the problems was that not every fortress had their goods. They knew that the Muslims were coming. So a lot of the treasures, a lot of the food, a lot of the money, whatever there was moved around from fortress to fortress. And they had actually little secret tunnels going from different places and so forth. So a couple of stories I want to talk about in the event of this first, right? And we don't really know through which part of the battle these events happened, but I'm going to mention 3 of these, which I think are very important to understand and lessons to be learned. Muhammad Sallam, when he was with the Sahabi, so you've got to remember, they're going out, they're fighting, they're coming back. They're going out, they're fighting, they're coming back. And Muhammad Sallam, and this was mentioned in Bukhari, he looked around and he saw this one man and he said, this man that you see over there, he pretends that he has his allegiance to Islam, but he's going to go to hell. Now, the Sahabi was shocked, and I'll explain to you why they were shocked. They've been watching this guy. They're like, are you sure? This man, when he fights, he's fighting like his whole Islam depends on it. He's at the forefront of every one of those battles. Every time, every morning we go out there, he's at the front, he's fighting. He's the last one back. He's continuously, and he's doing whatever. So when Muhammad said this was a little bit confusing to them. So one Sahabi decided to follow him. So when this man went out the next day to fight, this man followed him. Now, this man, when he was out there and he was fighting, naturally, a time will come where you'll be overwhelmed by the enemy. And he was overwhelmed. He got cut and sliced and injured very badly, to the point that it was almost like inevitable that he was going to die. But we don't know that, right? But what the Sahabi did see when he watched him, he said, as he was injured and he was trying to get himself up, he took an arrow from his quiver. He took it out and he placed it in the floor. And what he done, he leant over and he put it against his heart, and then he pressed it down and killed himself. Effectively, he committed suicide. When they came back and they said to Muhammad sallallahu, Ya Rasul, you were absolutely right about this man. And Muhammad sallallahu said, a man may perform the actions like those who belong in paradise and seem to people that he belongs in paradise, yet his abode will be headed for hell. He will be targeted for hell. Or he may perform the actions such as those of the inhabitants of hell, yet he will be headed for paradise. It is very difficult for you and me to tell who is going to go to heaven and who is going to go to hell. We have this attitude that we see a Muslim, we see them do one haram and say, this guy's going to hell. Astaghfirullah. We have no idea what other good he does. We know from other stories that we talked about the Hazrat Naim, the Sahabi, who had a drink problem, addiction. But Muhammad ﷺ loved him so much, and he reminded the Sahabi, even though they really cursed upon him because of his drinking, he said that, look, he's done so many good acts, he will enter the paradise. We cannot judge, and therefore we have to be very, very careful. Therefore, what you see is very missing. We just make dua for everyone that we all enter paradise, because like they say, you will not even want it on your worst enemy to be punished in hellfire. Hellfire is that bad. You will feel sorry and pity for the worst of them. That's how severe it is. So this is a very important lesson to understand, that you don't know how to judge people, and therefore you should never judge people. Let them be as they are and just give them nasiyah. Another beautiful story was about this Abyssinian slave. This Abyssinian slave worked for a Jewish master in Khaybar. He was never involved in the politics, never got involved in anything, okay? And he didn't realize what was really going on. Now, when the commotion started, his job was basically, he would work for this master. His job was every day, take the herd out, graze them and bring them back. Then all this commotion kicked off in Khaybar, and he said to the people, what's going on? Why are you guys running around like this? He says, don't you know that the man who claims that he is the prophet of God is coming for us? Now that struck a chord with him immediately, because he's Abyssinian. Who are Abyssinian? They're Christians, right? So remember that in the time of Muhammad ﷺ, and even prior to that, there was talk amongst the Jews and the Christians within their own religion about a final prophet to come. So it's not like this is an alien concept to them. But this struck a chord with him. So immediately he rushed out with the herd and he approached Muhammad ﷺ. When he went to Muhammad ﷺ, he said to him, are you Muhammad? He said, yes. He said, what do you call upon? He says, I call upon the Tawheed, the oneness of God. And for people to believe in the messengers and the prophets, and to accept me as a prophet, and to believe in heaven and hell, and to believe in all the articles. And that is what I call for. Now, straight away, he could see the similarities. And he said, I am nothing but a black man with an ugly face, with no money. I have nothing. And he said, look, it's irrelevant of color, skin, religion, this, that, whatever. Once you accept Islam, once you come away from your religion and you follow this, doesn't matter who you are, what background you come from, doesn't matter what past religion or which tribe you've been or what you've done in your past. Once you accept Islam, then it is a clean slate for you. So he said to him, then I accept the Shahada. He said to Muhammad ﷺ, what do I do with these animals? He said, the master has trusted me with this. What do I do with this? He said, you remove this. He goes, let them go, hit their backs and let them go back to the master. Allah has relieved you of your duty, of your imanat, right? Because this is very important, because when you've been given something by someone, it's your responsibility, it stays your responsibility until it returns back safely. But here, Muhammad ﷺ saying, because now you've taken the Shahada, the circumstances are different, you release it and Allah has released your responsibility of this amanat. The man goes immediately and he starts to fight. at the end of the day, what used to happen was when the Muslims went out and they fought, they would bring back the dead and they would put them in the tent. So when they brought back all the dead, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would enter into the tent where the bodies were, because he would go in there to make dua for them. And he saw this man, he saw the slave, and he made dua for him. He felt sorry for him in the sense that he just became Muslim and that, that this is his fate. But he said that this man is the only person that I know of that on the same day he became a Muslim and a martyr, and he did not even have to pray a single salah, and he's gone straight to heaven. And whilst he was there, he said to the Sahabi, I can see his two wives. He may have think that he was ugly here, but he has the most two beautiful wives in paradise, and they're fighting over him right now. So even this lesson will show us that it is about your intention and your clean heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala effectively allows us to become Muslims every day, to reignite, to re-engage our relationship with him. Yesterday we did haram. Today, if we repent and we start all over again, Allah Ta'ala can potentially forgive us. So we always have this in our mind. And therefore, Muslims should never despair and think to themselves, I've done so much haram, I can never do good. You can do 100 harams and do one good, and that one good will wipe out the 100 harams. So you need to think in a very positive manner. This is mainly for the youth, because the youth feel very distracted, demotivated, because they think that we're engaged in so much bad things. Allah Ta'ala is not going to have mercy on me. That's completely incorrect. It goes completely against the Quran. Allah says, I have more mercy than your mother does. 80 times more. It didn't say in the Quran, but this was it explained by one of the scholars, that his mercy is so great. One of the other stories was about another Bedouin, that when he found out that the Muslims were going to fight the Jews of Khaybar, he came to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he expressed his interest in Islam, and he took the Shahada. And it's very possible that the Bedouin heard about Islam from the dawah that was happening by all the other various Muslims, and it's moving from town to city, etc. Because that was the most effective part of the conversion, is that before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived in many towns and many villages and many cities, a lot of the dawah was done. A lot of people knew about Islam, so it made it very clear, very easy for people to embrace Islam and to understand it. So this man had already got to a point that he was convinced, and he found Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or heard Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was having this battle against the Jews of Khaybar, and he came and he took his allegiance as a Muslim. Now, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to this Bedouin, I'm going to give you in the responsibility of this Sahabi. He will arm you up and you go out and you fight and so forth. Well, they went one day when they took over that particular fortress. They took some of the goods from there. There wasn't much, but the goods were taken. As the goods came back, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would distribute the goods, and he kept a certain amount for this Bedouin. And this Bedouin was guarding the rear, because he wasn't a great fighter, so they would keep him at the back just to guard and protect from the rear. So when they allocated this to the Bedouin was like, why are you giving this to me? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you as a Muslim have a right to the booty. This is what is a reward from Allah. He goes, this is not what I joined Islam for. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, then what else? He said, I joined Islam so that I can sacrifice myself, and he pointed to his throat, so I can take a spear to my throat and die for the sake of Allah and enter paradise, the greatest reward. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, if you put your trust in God, then Allah will put his trust in you. The following day he went back out and he fought, and they brought him back. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw this Bedouin, and they found that he had an arrow exactly where he pointed in his neck, that it hit him. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam took off his own robe and he shrouded him in that robe, and he made dua for this man. So you could here, even then, you see there are some of us in this dunya who aren't necessarily interested in gaining the materialistic things in life. We're all different. Okay, there's nothing wrong with gaining material things and achieving those elements. But there are some whose iman and belief and the desire for the akhirah is so much that they can't stop themselves from getting there fast enough. And that's what their desire was. I feel that you need the balance of both. But in this 20th century, where we live today, I feel like that the desire for the akhirah really is just a myth for us. There is no real consolidated belief or foundation for us to motivate ourselves for the akhirah. We talk about it a lot. We all talk about it a lot. But I do feel sometimes it's just lip service. Look, akhirah is not one of them things that I can just take you on a bus journey and take you there and show it to you until you can say, this is what I want. It's not like me taking you down to a nice place in Turkey or Dubai and showing you, look, you can have one of these flats and say, yeah, I've seen it. That's what I want to desire. It's one of those things where you have to believe in through your mind and your heart. You can't visually bring it into yourself. And therefore you need to understand it. And the only way you can do that is getting towards the Quran, by reading those verses, by reading those, the studies of the Quran and the tafsir. These are the things that will help you build up and get you closer to that. On that day, when Muhammad ﷺ had won the fortress of Naim, he then went through systematically, one by one, all the other fortresses. A lot of them were very difficult and very challenging. I mean, just imagine that as he took some of those fortresses and he took people, he captured people as well, and he held them prisoners and the booty was distributed, that even some of the Jews, one Jew came up to Muhammad ﷺ and said, look, and he was convinced that Muhammad ﷺ was going to win. And that is partly because of the fact that he knew in his scriptures that he is the prophet, that there's no doubt that God is going to give him the victory. And he said to Muhammad ﷺ, if I give you inside information, will you give protection to me and my family? And Muhammad ﷺ said, yes. He said, I will tell you now, some of these fortresses, they can stay in there for months because they got underground tunnels that they are going through, and they are going to the springs and they are getting themselves water and whatever they require. And you don't know about this. So here then Muhammad ﷺ tactfully with the army started to break down all of these routes. They even introduced catapults into this wall. So they couldn't get over the fortresses. So they would build these catapults and they would literally just throw these rocks over the fortresses, weaken up the structure, and eventually, and some of these structures came down and weakened. There are a couple of events that happened that are also quite important to remember. So, and we will talk about a little bit more detail. Safiya bin Huyay bin Akhtab is one of the female Jews that was caught on that day. And Safiya, as you know, radiallahu anha, became the wife of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And we'll talk about her in a little while. Safiya was instrumental because she's actually the daughter of Huyay bin Akhtab, who was one of the leaders of the Banu Nadir. Okay, and he was a very, very powerful guy. And subhanAllah, ironically, God, he was the one who hated him one of the most. And who would he ever imagine that his daughter would be the wife of Muhammad ﷺ? SubhanAllah, how things work out. But a couple of things for you guys that you might be interested in. So some of the rulings that actually occurred during this time. One thing that happened was because there wasn't much food during the whole siege. Remember, they traveled a long way. The siege went on for quite a while. Not a lot of the food and the booty came to them because they hadn't conquered all the other fortresses. What started to happen was some of the Muslims started to kill the donkeys and started to cook them and eat them. And then Muhammad ﷺ received a revelation and he announced to the Muslims that forbidden for you is the meat of the donkey. So this is where that ruling came from. Okay, now, interestingly enough, we'll take this off in one of our fiqh classes, but interestingly enough, many of the scholars have various different reasons and opinions about this. But categorically, it's very clear that the donkey meat is forbidden for you. couple of other things that came out of that, right? So the men who would capture the women and the slave women, it was forbidden for them to have any intercourse relationship while they were pregnant. The hukum regarding carnivorous animals, yeah, so animals that will eat other animals, effectively, they were forbidden for you, like meat eaters, they are forbidden for you. The ruling came down on this as well. And selling the spoils of war before it has been allocated to you, even using them. So for example, if I captured a horse, I am not allowed to use that horse and ride that horse and tire it out and then give it back to the state. It's haram. So particular rulings came out in regards to this. And probably one of the most important ones, which is a big problem not in our community, but I've been hearing about it. It probably happens in other parts of strains of the Islamic religions, is the nikah al-mu'ta. This is forbidden. So this is called the temporary marriages. So one period of time in Islam, during the time of Muhammad allowed the temporary marriages to happen, where a man with the army would travel and they would capture people. They would have temporary marriages, just for the relationship, and then discard that marriage. On this day, this was forbidden, and Muhammad said categorically that nikah al-muta is forbidden until the day of judgment. And we know many hadiths on this. Now, the reason why I raise this up is just important for you to understand these rulings, because these are some of the subjects I know have come up and people have spoken about it. And it's always good to get some context behind it, and for you to go away and do some little bit more research. I'm not going to go through the fiqh issue on this, because that's not the purpose of this particular talk. So now the Muslims are advancing slowly to all the various other forts. And people started to complain to Muhammad ﷺ that, look, Ya Rasul, we haven't got enough food. What do we do? And this is where Muhammad ﷺ made this dua to Allah. And he said, oh Allah, you well know their state, the Muslim, how difficult it is for them. Look at their condition, and that they have no strength. And that I, as a prophet, right now with me, I have nothing to give to them. And then he made this dua, and he carried on saying to Allah, oh Allah, open up before them the wealthiest of their fortresses and give them sufficiency, mainly in fats and food. And then the next fortress that they took, which is Al-Sab, which is the one after a name, this one was fully loaded. Apparently, this fortress had the majority and the most of wealth. And they caught this and they took everything from this, okay? And then the conquest continued on all the way down to the last two fortresses, which is Al-Wahdi and Al-Sulaylam. Now, these two last ones, that took them 10 days, to take down, 10 days. God, I just want you to get a context behind this. Look at the time and the effort that Allah Ta'ala puts them through to try to achieve this victory. Allah Ta'ala could have just crumbled them like this. But no, it is hard work and effort and sacrifice. Because in some of that, from the stories you can see, some became Muslim that day and they died as martyrs. Some went to fight and they went to hellfire. In any particular event, you're always going to get different results from each and every one of us. That's why I say it's very important to check your heart and your iman, to make sure that whatever you do, you're doing things for the right reason. If you go somewhere and things don't go your way, ask yourself, why am I here? You're always there for the sake of Allah. Whether the result gets achieved or not, it is what Allah Ta'ala wants. It's the sacrifice that you made for Allah and what Allah Ta'ala wanted best for you. One of the fortresses that were captured, there was a lot of cattle and that were running outside. And Muhammad ﷺ saw this cattle running back into the fortress. Because they were hungry, Muhammad ﷺ said to the Sahabi, who's going to capture the cattle so that we can eat it? And there's one Sahabi by the name of Abu al-Yasir. He went running. And when he went running, he went so fast, he was like a sprinter. And when he went there, he caught two ewes and he walked back with them under his arms and came to Muhammad ﷺ. Now, when he was running, Muhammad ﷺ, he just smiled and laughed and he made a dua to Allah and he said, Ya Allah, oh Allah, let us enjoy him for the longest possible. And you know what's really sad about this? When Abu Yasir came back, he gave the ewe, he goes, we sacrificed it and we all ate, we were heart content. Many, many years afterwards, Abu Yasir narrated this story. And when he would narrate this story, he would cry. He said, and Muhammad sallam said in that dua, let us enjoy Abu Yasir, Abu Yasir's days, the longest. He goes, and every Sahabi has enjoyed my whole life, my companionship, and I am the last of them to go now. He was the very last of the Sahabi. Now, I just want you to think for a second. The most difficult time and the testing time was the beginning, when the sacrifices they had to make. You put your family on the line, you put your wealth on the line, you put your blood on the line, you put everything on the line. But what keeps you going is not just the iman that you have, is the companionship that you have that keep you motivated towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why this is important is because people should remember the company you keep are those who will either keep you tied to Allah or they will sever your relationship with Allah. And you know exactly who those people are. So for the youth, you will go through your life. Many of the fathers here and the mothers here, they know exactly what I'm talking about. In life, we have moved with different people and we have learnt from our mistakes. And when we look back, we think to ourselves, Ya Allah, if I had followed him and carried on, I would never have taken the path of Islam. By the blessing of Allah, that relationship got severed, or I got drifted away from him and I got moved to the right people. So people like Abu Yasir, it was important that he saw all of his companions who went through all this hardship, this relationship, one by one. When you see your friends who've gone through with you through the ranks, who've gone through with you with the struggle, and they slowly all one by one pass away, it hits you. So Abu Yasir, when he's narrating the story, he's in tears and he's saying, and I was the last one that was left for everyone to enjoy my life just because of that dua that Muhammad sallam had made. So this was imperative and very, very important. So I'm going to finish off with the last bit, okay? So we're just talking about Safiya, the most important story, okay? Because this is really kind of was an important element of the war of Hudaybiyah. The Treaty of Khaybar, the Battle of Khaybar. So Safiya was the daughter of Huyay bin Akhtab. So when they had captured her, this is what happened prior to Muhammad sallam arriving. Safiya had narrated this story, and she said that when I left Medina, when we got exiled out of Medina, I was young. I did not hit the maturity age. I was close to it, but I wasn't mature yet. So when I went to Khaybar and we settled there, eventually what happened was when I reached the age of maturity, because you got to remember how many years it was, okay? A few years, and eventually she hit the age of maturity. So she's very young. I married my cousin. Now, one day she said, when I was sleeping, and she said that my head was in the lap of my husband. I fell asleep and I had a dream. And in that dream, I saw the moon, and the moon came from the skies, from the heavens, and it landed on my lap, and it kept on coming like this. So when I woke up, I said to my husband, this is the dream I had. He became so angry. He said to me, so now you desire the king of Yathrib to be your husband. He clocked on. She didn't clock on. That this moon was basically coming from Medina to Khaybar into her lap. And he became so angry, he gave her one big wallop, massive big black eye, and injured her neck, bruised it up. Now, during the event of the Khaybar, when they captured everyone, Safiya was captured and a whole bunch of people were captured. Now, when they were captured, Muhammad sallam started to divide the booty. Now, Diyar came, one of the Sahabi came to Muhammad sallam and said to Muhammad sallam when he saw Safiya was beautiful. And when he saw, he goes, I want you to reward me, Muhammad sallam, with this woman. So Muhammad sallam said, you take her, okay? One other Sahabi came to Muhammad sallam and he said to Muhammad sallam, This woman, Safiya, is the daughter of Huyay bin Akhtab. She is a combination of the Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayza. She has come from a very noble family. She is not worth anyone except for your level. You should take her for yourself. The Sahabi was very smart, because Muhammad doesn't take them because they're beautiful and, oh, he wants them for themselves. He takes them for political reasons, and you will see it for many reasons later on with some of his marriages. Many of the marriages he had was to build a relationship with other communities. So he said to Diya, I'm going to take her for myself, you take the other two. Okay, meaning he had two of her cousins, so he took that. So Muhammad, now people were confused. Is he taking her as a slave or is he taking her as a wife? And they would know, because Muhammad would take his cloak off and put around her. And they said, if he puts a veil over her, then that's his wife. Because we know the hadith came out already, or sorry, the ayah came around that the veil should be put over the wives of the Prophet Muhammad. So the veil was put on. So when this situation occurred, Muhammad wanted to marry her. Now, a couple of things he wanted to check: make sure she wasn't pregnant, because obviously she was married before, which she wasn't. And secondly, he obviously had to wait for the menstruation period as well, and that would prove that she's not pregnant. So after that period, when they traveled out, look at Safiya. When they traveled 6 miles out Khaybar, so this is now post-Khaybar event. When they traveled outside, Muhammad wanted to consummate the marriage, because it's sunnah to consummate immediately. So when he revered off the road, he found out that Safiya wasn't forthcoming. This bothered him. He didn't say nothing. Such was Muhammad's character. He would never like, why are you not doing this? I am your husband. I can dictate whatever. He was a very soft-hearted person. He didn't say nothing. He didn't want to offend her. He just left it. Then they got further out, and then he tried again, and then they consummate the marriage. Then he said to Safiya, he said, can I ask you a question? He said, when the first time when I wanted to consummate the marriage with you, why were you reluctant? He said, we were only 6 miles outside of Khaybar, and I feared for your life. So she had already loved Muhammad. He was already loving him. And she said, I didn't want any harm to come to you. Therefore, I wanted to make sure we were far away so that we have protection. So here you begin to see that how over a period of time that Muhammad's work and his efforts and the Sahabi's efforts is almost like taking a gun, shooting it, and it just ricochets everywhere. You just don't know who it's going to hit. Safiya is growing up and she's learning about the Muslims. She's been in Medina. You don't know how it's impacted her. I mean, her father was totally against Islam. He was like, you know, it's like having a neo-Nazi father, right? You would expect the kids to become neo-Nazis, but subhanAllah, that's never always the case. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can put Islam into your heart, as he did with Safiya radiallahu anha, and she then became the wife of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.